Hi, this is Doug Sperling, and my email is doug.spurling@yahoo.com. Doug.sperling@yahoo.com. I am a Cars and Car Shops member, subscriber, and I'm intrigued with your Mojave and Panamint work. I had come up with quite independently come up with a similar scenario based on Senator Jones's Los Angeles and Independence, and I just wanted to share some of my material with you, mostly because it's fun and interesting, and I think you'd be entertained by it. Um, so, Los Angeles and Independence. I started this work, by the way. This is a proto freelance concept. It's basically the same concept or similar concept to what you've done. It turns out, and it's a similar concept to what Craig Tice did. I didn't know about any of his or your work at the time. I just came up with this. I guess that means it's a pretty obvious idea, which is good. That's a good thing. That means it seems real. Um, So, first step is, for me anyway, was to research Senator Jones's 1875 to 1877 Los Angeles and Independence project. I've drawn a really rough map here of the line as it was built um, from downtown Los Angeles to Santa Monica. I have much better maps. This is just a very rough placeholder. Um, and then, as I imagine or understand that it was projected out over Cajon Pass via a tunnel, which I take it would have been in this area, um, and then out across the desert, past Searles Lake, over Slate Range Pass, and then to the foot of Surprise Canyon Gulch, and Panamint itself is up here. The red line is, I understand that Senator Jones did not, as far as I could tell, plan a railroad actually to the town of Panamint. I actually did. My work is civil engineering and surveying, so I have actually engineered a potential line and a technology for getting up there. I'll discuss that briefly. That is fiction. What I'm talking about now is some of our evidence for the real project. Just want to do that quick. So, a couple of things. Some of the map evidence for the real project. I've got maps from various sources. These are not well georeferenced. I do have them well georeferenced other places, but these are mostly either valuation maps or they are derived from valuation maps. And probably the good one is this valuation map from, I think, 1978. It's a Southern Pacific valuation map. This actually is um, pretty well georeferenced, and we seem to have yeah, there we go. Okay, um, and this identifies the Los Angeles and Independence line, very precisely. Um, in terms of later features, so that we can identify really on the ground within a few feet where this actually was. Um, so anyway, that's an example of some of the resources I've used to actually locate and draw this line. Um, whoops, in the downtown area, here, let's bring back some fade. By the way, we're looking right now at Google Earth. So these are Sanborn maps from 1888. I cannot get these yet in color from Library of Congress. They're in process of posting their maps. Um, they're not done yet. So here we are. Give it a little more fade, and you can see this is 5th Street. This is San Pedro. Um, that's Alameda. That used to. Whoops, sorry. That's Alameda. That was the Southern Pacific main line to San Pedro. Ran right down the middle of the street. And these are roughly georeferenced Sanborn maps. This is the index. I kept that in there because it shows this is an area that in 1888 had no good coverage in here. There was nothing. This apparently was open fields. But this shows the line that Southern Pacific built to connect to their main over in Alameda Street. And so it was something like that. These index maps are very large scale, so they're quite rough. I will turn those off and we can look quickly. So here's the detail map. This is sheet, looks like this is sheet 25 of volume 1, plate 25 of volume 1, and you can see by 1888 this was California Door Company, and you can see tower. So this is the old Los Angeles and Independence station, and there was the track station, the house track still in the street, and there were a couple of tracks, and then there's the connector that SP built right there. So the line continued down the middle of 5th Street, I'm sorry, San Pedro, and then turned, and the right of way is still empty down there, where it turned for Santa Monica. So anyway, and so you can see from inspecting this map that the famous picture or pictures that you always see of the station were taken from, about here looking this way. And then some other map evidence for Los Angeles and Independence. This is from Library of Congress. It's an 1875 map of the town site, and it shows and labels the railroad, and there's a lot of stuff. There were real mines up here. They're shown in this perspective view. This is all sort of explained. And here, let's give that a little. There we go. That's what that map really looks like. So there's a lot of detail here. This is a very important document. Anyway, bring the fade back. So that's Los Angeles and Independence as it really existed. 1877, Senator Jones had some financial setbacks. He was a Comstock millionaire, and he sold his line to Southern Pacific, and this ended up being a part of Pacific Electric. It was torn out at various times, in various places, and it's all gone. It's basically all gone now, but has since been, some of the line has been restored for transit, I guess. Yeah, there it is, or some version of it. Here we are in Palms. I used to live right over here. Used to sort of hover around and walk around this abandoned right-of-way. Real interesting. Anyway, that's enough of that. So my scenario imagines that Senator Jones imagines a couple of things. What do we have here? First of all, this is a KMZ map. I think I told you we're looking at Google Earth. This is a KMZ map of Southern Pacific as it existed in 1877. This was the whole company, its entire property. And I've got them, identified by who this was. This was Central Pacific of August 1877. This is Valuation Corporation CP2. This was their line. There's Monterey and Salinas Valley. The color is different because at this time it wasn't part of SP yet. It was independent. So I imagine that Senator Jones made his peace with Southern Pacific and made a plan to um, build from Mojave uh, to two things: his Panamint properties here, and a connector that would have gone up Owens Valley, uh, over Mount Montgomery Pass, which was McBride's Pass at the time, typically called, and then up the valley, maybe to connect with Eureka and Palisade and create possibly a Southern Pacific allied, um, or a Big Four allied uh, shortcut to Los Angeles that didn't involve going over Donner and then over Tehachapi. Anyway, so it was potentially strategically important for the Big Four. Um, what I have here is basically they might have built from Mojave up this way. That's Red Rock Canyon, California. Highway 14 goes through there now. Um, and on through Poison Canyon, by Searles Lake, over Slate Range Pass, and to the foot of Surprise Canyon. And then I imagined a 3-foot gauge, 6% maximum grade and 32-degree maximum curve line that would have to be worked by geared locomotives. Now there were no commercially available geared locomotive yet. Shea and such, as of 1877, 1878, were about a decade in the future. But there was an arrangement that was sometimes used for logging locomotives, was technologically possible at that time in terms of metallurgy and in terms of the lubrication technologies, which were really a couple of things that had to be solved, so that and gear cutting technologies that had to be solved in order to build things like Shea locomotives and climaxes. So an arrangement like this, that there were some of these, they did exist, not a lot, some. This would have been about a 3-to-1 gear ratio, so connected through gears that you can't see. I just threw this together. It took me about 5 minutes in Photoshop. This is a modification of the real Uncle Dick locomotive that Santa Fe used. We're gonna go to Santa Fe Railroad and Santa Fe Railway and Historical and Modeling Society site, and you can see here's some drawings, Baldwin locomotive drawings of the 280T Uncle Dick. I imagine a 282 tank locomotive, 3-foot gauge, to work this thing. Why wouldn't they just have used switchbacks? The main logic here is to keep this operation unidirectional, really for safety, in particular to keep the crown sheet covered. This thing would point uphill at all times and push the train uphill. And what would they have been moving? Well, overwhelmingly important would be fuel. This is a potential line up Jawbone Canyon to an area with a good wood supply. In reality, the mines in this area got their charcoal, from charcoal kilns at Wild Rose. There they are. They still exist in Death Valley National Park. And so that had to be brought by mule train down here and then up Surprise Canyon. So a much cheaper way to get a much more reliable and larger volume of fuel could have been supplied by the railroad. That would be one of the reasons for building the more challenging line up Red Rock instead of up over this area like SP did later in around 1910 when they built the Jawbone line. The other motivation would have been that they were possibly also really thinking strategically about the mines at Cerro Gordo, and about going up the Owens Valley to connect here to Eureka and Palisade. Okay, Um, so that's really my scenario. I imagine that this was not super successful uh, commercially. As we know, there was a bad flash flood that destroyed most of the town in, I believe, early 1877. They would have already had this work underway. Um, and they could have built something like this. This is about 100 miles of line. They could have graded this in a number of months. There are no tunnels needed. Um, and let me show you, I've done extensive engineering. This is the work I do um, in real life. Um, I work on roads and power plants and power lines a lot. So I've done a lot of work. Let's turn off that. Um, to engineer this in real life. Where did I get my topographic data? Let's see if this thing works well. I georeferenced old topos, but you can also, there's a tool available from National Geographic that has georeferenced instances of USGS maps for the whole US. Um, it doesn't load well anymore because Windows just updated, and hopefully it'll. Here we go. So these are georeferenced topos. They're USGS topos, paper maps that were scanned and then georeferenced and published by National Geographic Society. And you can see it's not loading. Let's back out a little. That sometimes that kicks it into life. So it's not performing well for me here. It's making me look stupid. Anyway, I used that tool to perform. This is real engineering. That doesn't mean it's perfect. It's rough. If we were really going to design a road or railroad here, we would go out and get probably 1 foot, or in this area possibly 2 foot contour interval contours for the area of interest. And that could be done. That could be done now with a drone. It would take a few $1,000s, but it could be done. You would fly this area, shoot it with LiDAR, and then you'd have a very good topo. So I have a coarse topo. I have like 20 and 40 foot contour interval topos here. Let's see if we can kick it into life again. Oh, yeah, see? There we go. Okay, here it comes. You have to sort of wait for it all to load. There it goes. Okay. There we go. Okay. And then, so I used this information basically to perform a whole lot of manual calculations. Ordinarily these days we use, we build a 3D model like this, but the process is automated. And you build a CAD model. I don't have AutoCAD on this computer, but I have the viewer, and I also have not built at this time yet. I have not built any Mojave and Panamint locomotives, but I have other analogous sort of proto 3D models that I've built in CAD, and they're, this is a blank. It's very rough. For another fictitious line, you can see that I've got an Alco RST 35 and a fictional 2662 3-foot gauge locomotive here. And we can give that, I guess, some, we could give that some, I think there's a better one. A better Shades of Gray is pretty good. Pretty explanatory. Anyway, this is an example of where I will get. I'll do this, and then I'll export this to something like Blender, and you can get a model that you could use in trains. Anyway, so enough of that. I have also built, let's take a quick look at Panamint Railroad. That's my fictitious 6% line up to the town of Panamint. I just want to show you that quick. I imagine a station in this area somewhere, and you'll see you saw on the map that there's a good source of water over here, so they had planned a concentrator mill. So there would be a branch of Panamint Railroad over to that concentrator mill. I'm not showing that here, but in this file, but drawn it elsewhere. So I use these circle templates. Here, let's fade the National Geographic topo back. And you can see I use these circle templates to get really accurate curves. And that's about, this is probably the best I can do with these tools and this source database. What would be going on up here at the town of Panamint? Well, that is approximately the location of the actual mill that we see in a lot of photos. You can see the shadow of the smokestack right there. There is potentially a flat area from about here to here. If it curves around like this, they could have built a couple of yard tracks. This would have had to be on a trestle or something like that. So you would have had 3 or 4 yard tracks right here on a trestle. What's that topo look like? Well, let's bring the topo back. There we go. And you can see that would be levelish. Potentially, if they did some grading, and some of that yard would have been on trestle, and they could have reached this area right here. They could have actually served the mill directly with a switchback arrangement. Whoops, we need path. With a switchback arrangement, right? Something like that. They could have, on a 6% grade, you could get right up to this thing that way. There might have been a station in here. The main town was up here. It looks like that's about, that's about 1,000 feet, so 300 yards down the hill. This would have been a station in here. And then the hill begins right there. And you can see right off the bat, 32-degree curve. Why did I choose 32? I happen to know that that's approximately in the area that we're talking about, late 1870s, around 1880. That was technologically possible for 3-foot gauge equipment. That would not have been like, nothing here. I wanted this to sort of be real, so there's nothing would have had to been invented, or there's nothing revolutionary. It's very steep and very challenging, but there's only a few tunnels actually required. I think 4 or 5 tunnels in the whole thing. The big one is right there. I actually will want to go back and inspect this area personally, and have a look at this. But that's about a 750-foot tunnel, and then another tunnel here. You want to stay well clear of this wash right here, so it's okay to cross it a couple of times, but the major motivation for the location work I did involved staying out of here. A much cheaper line could be built if you wanted to stay closer to the wash itself, but it would be very difficult because there'd be a lot of destructive rain events. So the hydrology in here is very challenging and complex. You'll notice that the north bank of the canyon is much easier in most areas than the south bank. That's why I chose that. Anyway, I just thought you'd be amused or entertained by some of this work. And that's pretty much it. So thank you very much. Again, I'd love to sort of hear and see more of your work if you've got it. Again, just thanks for watching. I appreciate it.